Hey everyone! Tonight we begin with something so ordinary you might think it couldn't possibly lead to a storm. Picture me an older woman in a gray cardigan, silver hair pinned back, purse tucked under my arm, walking into the Maple Street Bank on a quiet Oregon morning. The sunlight was sliding through the glass windows, catching the dust motes in the air, and the smell of stale coffee drifted from the break area. I had nothing on my mind except checking my savings account, the one my late husband Robert and I had started 40 years ago. But that day, the quiet became thunder. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. I hadn't even made it past the lobby when I froze. 20 feet away, at the branch manager's desk, sat Brianna, my daughter-in-law. She wore a cream-colored suit, hair pinned neatly, her voice perfectly rehearsed. She wasn't there to cash a check or make a deposit. No. She was there with a folder of papers spread out, speaking in a calm, professional tone I'd never heard at home. She's no longer mentally competent, Brianna said, her voice as smooth as silk. The doctor has confirmed it. For a second, the whole bank fell away. I couldn't hear the printers, the phones, or the murmurs of other customers. It was like I'd been shoved underwater. Me, not competent. The woman who balanced ledgers for decades. The woman who built a business with her husband from nothing. The woman who knew every bill, every account number, every signature by heart. And now my daughter-in-law was standing there, erasing me with a stamp and a smile. I ducked behind a divider, my hand gripping the edge of the counter. Through the narrow gap, I saw the folder she carried. Thick papers, official-looking stamps, signatures, she added, her voice low with feigned sympathy. It's been very hard for us, but it's necessary. We just want to protect her assets. We, that word cut sharper than the accusation, because it meant Daniel, my son, the boy who once held my hand at Robert's funeral and promised I'd never be alone, was in on this too. I can't describe what it feels like to hear your own child's silence weaponized against you. It was like my heart split into two, one half refusing to believe it, the other whispering, "Of course. You saw the signs." I remembered all the little things. Brianna, insisting she'd handle the bills online. Brianna keeping my bank card safe in her wallet. Brianna saying, "Mom, you're forgetting more lately. Don't worry. I've got it." At the time, I thought she was being helpful. I wanted to see her as family. But standing there, hearing her claim I had dementia, I realized I'd been handing her the keys to my own undoing. My breath shook, my knees trembled. But then, in the middle of my panic, I heard Robert's voice. Not literally, of course, just the memory of him. Strong and steady. "Don't let anyone take what we built, Marjorie. Not while you're still breathing." So I stepped out from behind the divider. The click of my heels echoed across the lobby. Heads turned. Brianna froze mid-sentence, then pasted on a smile so fragile it might crack if I breathed on it. "Mom," she stammered, her voice unnaturally high. "What are you doing here?" I met her eyes, clutching my purse strap to keep my hand from shaking. "Checking my own accounts," I said evenly. "And you?" "You seem to be doing that for me." The air shifted. Mr. Jenkins, the branch manager I'd known for years, looked stunned. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hale?" Perhaps we should pause for a moment. But I cut him off, my voice steadier than I felt. "No. I want to see those documents." Now, he hesitated, glancing between us, then slid the folder across. I flipped it open with trembling fingers, and there it was. My signature, except it wasn't. Sloppy strokes. The tail of the E missing its familiar curve. I looked Brianna dead in the eye. "This is forgery." Her smile faltered, lips twitching. "Oh no. Maybe the teller?" "Don't call me Mom," I interrupted, my voice low and sharp. "Mothers are loved. What you're doing isn't love, it's burial." The silence in that lobby was suffocating. Even the receptionist had stopped typing, frozen in place. I turned back to Mr. Jenkins, sliding the file toward him. "Please freeze every account under my name until I can bring proper identification and make a record of this fraud." Today, Brianna's face drained of color. She clutched her purse, mumbling, then fled the bank with her heels clicking like hammers against tile. I stood there, shaking, but I didn't cry. Not in front of them. As Mr. Jenkins filed the paperwork, I whispered to myself, "You just signed your own sentence, Brianna." Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war I hadn't chosen, but one I would finish. On the drive home, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Wrinkled face, tired eyes, but not weak, not broken. Old age wisdom says, people don't steal everything from you at once. They take it piece by piece until you forget what whole felt like. And here's a quirky fact. In medieval Europe, a person could be declared legally incompetent simply for mismanaging grain during a famine. Scholars still argue whether that law protected society or just handed power to the greedy. As I parked in front of my house, I thought, either way, greed always looks the same. Polished, polite, pretending to protect until you strip away the mask. And that morning at the bank, I had pulled off Brianna's mask for the first time. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the house looked the same as always. White siding, rose bushes along the porch, Robert's old wind chime clinking faintly in the autumn breeze. But to me, it no longer felt like home. It felt like enemy ground. Inside, the smell of coffee lingered. The kitchen light was still on, though no one was there. I set my purse on the counter, the stolen file tucked safely inside. My hands trembled as I poured a glass of water, not because I was afraid, because I was steadying myself for the storm about to break inside these walls. It didn't take long. Footsteps upstairs, the creak of the railing. Then Daniel descended, his face tired, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been up pacing. He stopped at the bottom step, crossing his arms like he used to when he was a teenager caught in a lie. "Mom," he said, his voice tight. "What happened at the bank?" Before I could answer, Brianna appeared from the hallway, eyes red and swollen. Clutching a tissue like it was her last defense, she sniffled, voice trembling. She embarrassed me. Daniel, in front of everyone, she accused me of forgery, her own daughter-in-law. I was just trying to help. I laughed. A dry sound I barely recognized as my own. Help. By signing my name on medical papers for a doctor who doesn't exist. By calling me incompetent? Daniel flinched. He glanced at Brianna, then at me, his eyes darting back and forth like he was trapped between two fires. "Mom, she was only trying to make things easier. You've been forgetting things lately, misplacing your keys, missing appointments. That hurt more than the forged papers." My own son echoing her words like they were gospel. I stepped closer, my voice calm but sharp. "Forgetting keys isn't dementia. Daniel, forgetting to water the roses isn't incompetence. Don't you dare confuse ordinary age with helplessness." Brianna gasped softly, dabbing her eyes. "See? She's so defensive. I don't know what to do anymore. I thought we could take care of her together, but she's pushing us away." Her performance was flawless, tears welling at the perfect moment, voice cracking just enough to sound sincere. To anyone else, it would have looked like a desperate young wife struggling with a difficult mother-in-law. But I'd just seen the real Brianna at the bank. Calm, cold, calculating. I turned to Daniel, my eyes burning. "Son, do you know what hurts me most? It's not that she tried to steal from me. It's that you let her." You sat in silence while she painted me as weak. That silence screams louder than any lie she could tell. For a moment, I saw the boy I raised flicker in his face. His mouth opened, then closed again. He looked down, ashamed, but he didn't step forward. He didn't take my side. The house was so quiet, I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. I picked up the forged documents from my bag and laid them on the table between us. The signature, sloppy and false, stared back at me like a wound. "Look at this." "Daniel," I said softly, "that's not my hand. That's not my name. That's your wife trying to bury me alive while I'm still standing here." He didn't move, didn't touch the paper, just stood there with his arms crossed tighter, as if the truth might burn him if he reached for it. Brianna sniffled again, lowering her gaze. I made a mistake. Maybe I went too far, but it was out of love, not greed. I almost laughed again. Love doesn't come with forged stamps. Love doesn't erase a woman's voice. "You wanted my assets." "Brianna, you wanted my life." Her mask cracked, just for a second. Her lips pressed thin, her eyes hard. But then the tears returned, and she buried her face in Daniel's chest. "And my son, my only son, wrapped his arm around her, like she was the one who needed protecting. I stood there, frozen in that bitter tableau. Old age wisdom says, silence is not neutral. It sides with the strongest voice in the room, whether it's right or wrong. And here's a quirky fact. In ancient Sparta, silence was considered a form of discipline. Men were trained to endure insults without reply. Historians still argue whether that silence was strength or cowardice. As I looked at Daniel, silent and unmoving, while Brianna clung to him, I knew which kind of silence this was. Finally, I picked up the papers and tucked them back into my purse. My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever spoken in this house. If you won't defend me, Daniel, then I'll defend myself. And when this is over, you'll have to decide whether you're her husband first or my son. Neither of them spoke. Daniel looked away. Brianna kept sniffling. And I walked past them into the kitchen. I poured myself another glass of water, hands trembling slightly, but not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was war, and I wasn't about to lose. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, its blades slicing the dark in slow, hypnotic turns. Every creak of the house felt heavier, like the walls themselves were listening to my thoughts. Robert's side of the bed was empty, as it had been for 7 long years, but never had I wished more for his voice in the quiet. Instead, my mind replayed every moment that had led me here, the slow, patient theft of my independence disguised as help. It had started so innocently. Mom, let me pay the electric bill this month. It's easier online, and I won't risk a late fee, Brianna had said one evening with that sweet smile. I had shrugged, relieved. After all, technology had raced ahead of me. And truth be told, I preferred paper and stamps to digital passwords. Then it was the water bill, the gas bill, the property taxes. Each time, Brianna insisted. No need for you to fuss with this. I've got it handled. Handled. What a word. Back then, I thought she meant it kindly. But looking back, I see it for what it was. A word that meant controlled. Not long after, she started intercepting the mail. At first, she framed it like a favor. The mailbox is full of junk mail these days. I'll sort it out for you. Mom, she had chirped, dropping only a few envelopes on the kitchen counter while sliding the rest into her purse. I didn't notice the pattern until weeks later, when the thank you notes from the Veterans Charity never came, and the bank stopped sending paper statements. I had asked Daniel once, have you noticed I don't get much mail anymore? He had shrugged, distracted, pulling off his tie after work. Brianna probably switched everything to electronic. It's easier. Yes. Easier to erase me without my even knowing. And then there were the appointments. I've always been diligent about my health every 6 months. I go for a checkup. Blood work. The works. Robert used to joke that I'd outlive him because I never skipped an appointment. But one morning, I called my doctor's office to confirm my visit, and the nurse sounded surprised. Oh, Mrs. Hale, your daughter-in-law already rescheduled, said you needed more rest. My stomach had dropped. Rescheduled. Without asking me, the nurse paused. Well, she said you were feeling overwhelmed. When I confronted Brianna, she just smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face like it was the most natural thing. I thought you said you weren't up for it that week. Don't worry. I pushed it back. The way she said it made me doubt myself. Had I really mentioned being tired? Maybe I had. Age plays tricks sometimes, but deep inside, I knew the truth. She was building a case brick by brick. My forgetfulness here, my confusion there, all carefully curated until one day she could point and say, see, she's incompetent. I stared at the ceiling fan, fury replacing the exhaustion. Old age wisdom says, betrayal rarely arrives in thunder. It tiptoes in slippers, smiling, until it has the keys to your door. And here's a quirky fact. In 18th century England, a man could legally declare his wife insane and have her committed, often just to seize her property. Historians argue whether those women were truly ill or simply inconvenient, lying in the dark. I couldn't help but think how little had changed. Only now, instead of an asylum, the prison was financial guardianship. Instead of chains, it was forged documents. I got up, padded quietly into the living room, and sat by the window outside. The street lamp glowed against the maple trees. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger-lined face, tired eyes, but behind them was steel. I whispered into the empty room, Robert, I won't let her win. I promise you that. The grandfather clock ticked on, steady as a heartbeat. And in that silence, I began to plan. The very next week, fate handed me my first undeniable proof. I'd gone to the bank for something simple cash for a birthday gift for my granddaughter, Sophie. She's 12, bright as a spark, with hair the color of honey. She still loves getting a card from Grandma with crisp bills folded inside. It makes her feel grown up, she says. The teller, a young woman with freckles who's known me for years, smiled as she pulled up my account. Then her smile faded. Would you like to confirm the transfer from last Tuesday, Mrs. Hale? Transfer. I frowned. I didn't make any transfer. She turned the screen toward me. There it was, black and white. $2. 800 moved to an account under the name Hale Consulting LLC. My heart thudded. I'd never heard of such a company. And at the bottom of the slip was my signature, or at least a shaky imitation of it. The M sagged. The I lost its long curl, a stranger wearing my name. I asked for a printed copy. The teller hesitated, but finally slipped me the paper, whispering, "Maybe talk to the manager about this?" I shook my head. Not yet. Because I knew if I sounded the alarm too soon, Brianna would twist it, Daniel would look away, and I'd be painted as confused again. So I took that paper home, folded tight in my purse, like a weapon no one else could see. That evening, I set it on the kitchen table and slid it toward Brianna. "What's this?" I asked, my tone calm, as if I were asking about the weather. She glanced at it, then back at me with a thin smile. "Probably a bank error. I'll call tomorrow and straighten it out." Before I could stop her, she whisked the paper off the table and tucked it into her own folder. "Don't worry, Mom. Everything's safe." Her confidence was chilling. She didn't look rattled or ashamed. She looked prepared. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the photo wall. One frame in particular caught me. Me, Robert, and Daniel at Daniel's college graduation. Robert's hand was firm on my shoulder. My face was radiant with pride, and Daniel's grin stretched ear to ear. I whispered to the photo, "When did my son stop protecting me?" "Robert." "When did he hand me over?" The quiet answered back with nothing but the tick of the wall clock. I started to check quietly. I opened the file cabinet in my study, several folders missing. I looked through drawers, certain envelopes gone. I opened the bank app on my old laptop, password denied. Changed. Bit by bit, my world had been stripped without my noticing. But not anymore. I remembered the safe Robert had installed in the dining room cabinet, disguised behind old cookbooks. Most thought it was just a stack of family recipes, but I knew better. My fingers brushed over the spines until I found the hollow one. Behind it, the metal door. My heart pounded as I spun the dial. Click. Open. Inside, Robert's wedding ring in a velvet box, a stack of old ledgers, and a black USB drive. I picked it up with shaking hands. Robert had once joked, "This little thing carries more of our blood and sweat than my old toolbox." I held it to my chest, whispering, "Thank you, Robert. You knew a storm would come someday. Old age wisdom says, sometimes the greatest insurance isn't money, it's foresight." And here's a quirky fact. In ancient China, emperors hid emergency edicts in sealed boxes, only to be opened if someone tried to usurp the throne. Historians still debate if those papers saved dynasties or doomed them by breeding suspicion. I looked at the USB in my palm and thought, either way, suspicion just became my shield. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just began a list in my notebook. 1. Check status of Robert's shares. 2. Freeze joint accounts. Call Pauline, our lawyer. Compile evidence of forgery. By the time I set down my pen, I felt calm. A strange, cold calm. Because the war Brianna thought she was winning had only just begun. The following morning, I woke earlier than usual. Dawn light barely touched the curtains, but my mind was already racing. I made coffee, the strong kind Robert used to like, and sat at the kitchen table with the USB drive in my hand. It was small, unassuming, but I knew it carried decades of sweat, discipline, and sacrifice. I plugged it into my old laptop. The screen blinked, then opened to a neat list of folders. Hale Holdings, Maple Street Property, Trust Account, Investment Certificates. My chest tightened. Every piece of Robert's careful planning, preserved like treasure in this little black stick. One folder caught my eye. Emergency docs. Inside were scanned contracts, notarized papers, even a handwritten note from Robert. If you're opening this, it means the storm has come. Stay calm. Trust Pauline. I wiped my eyes, though I hadn't realized I was crying. Robert always had foresight, the kind of practical wisdom that felt like stubbornness at the time, but now looked like prophecy. By noon, I sat in Pauline's office. She'd been our attorney for 20 years steady. No nonsense. The kind of woman who made you believe the law could still be a shield. She greeted me with her usual firm handshake. "What's happened?" "Marjorie," she asked. Eyes sharp, I handed her the bank copy of the transfer slip. "My notebook. And the USB. They've been planning this for months. I need to be ready before they strike again." Pauline's brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. She plugged in the USB, scanned a few files, then leaned back. "This is good. Very good. It gives us leverage. But you mustn't confront them directly again. Let them think you're fragile. Let them get careless. That's when we strike." I frowned. "You want me to pretend?" "Not pretend," Pauline said, her voice calm. "Strategize. If they think you're watching, they'll bury the evidence. But if they think you're weak, they'll leave trails everywhere, huh?" Her words made me uneasy, but I knew she was right. That evening, I returned home and set Robert's USB back in the safe. I slid the dial shut with a soft click, feeling its weight settle like a heartbeat behind the steel. Dinner was tense. Brianna avoided my gaze, her fork scraping against her plate too loudly. Daniel made small talk about work. His words thin and brittle. I nodded, played the role of the distracted widow, and said little. Inside, though, my recorder, an old one Robert had used in business meetings, sat quietly in my cardigan pocket, capturing every word. "Daniel," Brianna said sweetly, "we really need to talk to that lawyer about Mom's will. It's irresponsible to leave things so messy." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe later." "Brianna, let's not push her," she sighed, putting her hand over his. "You know how she gets if we wait too long. It'll all slip away." Her voice was sugar, but the edge beneath it was steel. I kept my eyes on my plate, not letting my face betray what my recorder was already sealing as evidence. Later that night, alone in my room, I played it back. Her words filled the air, cold and deliberate. "If we wait too long, it'll all slip away." I leaned back in my chair, clutching the recorder. Old age wisdom says, sometimes the most dangerous people aren't the ones who shout in anger. They're the ones who whisper with a smile. And here's a quirky fact. In the 19th century, widows in America often wore mourning rings that held strands of their husband's hair inside. Some historians debate if those rings were symbols of devotion or chains that bound women to grief. As I listened to Brianna's voice, I thought, maybe I, too, had been wearing a kind of mourning ring, bound by trust and politeness. But tonight, I slipped it off. From now on, silence wouldn't be surrender. It would be my sharpest weapon. The next morning, the house stirred earlier than usual. I sat at the kitchen table, a folded newspaper in front of me. Though my eyes hadn't read a single word, my recorder was tucked in the pocket of my cardigan, switched on and ready. The sound of tires crunching in the driveway made me glance up. Brianna's SUV pulled in fast. Too fast. She stormed inside, her heels pounding the hardwood like gunfire. "What did you do to the secondary account?" she snapped, tossing her purse on the table. Her face was flushed, her blonde hair disheveled. "The bank says my access is suspended. They told me it was on your orders." I folded the newspaper neatly, met her eyes, and answered calmly, "Oh, maybe it's a security audit. Banks are careful these days." Her laugh was short, sharp, humorless. "Don't play dumb." "Mom, I know exactly what you're doing." "You want to cut me out?" I shrugged, sipping my coffee. Silence is sometimes louder than shouting. Daniel came down the stairs, looking rumpled and tired, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "What's going on?" Brianna whirled on him, tears instantly rising like water from a faucet. "Your mother locked us out of the accounts. I can't pay insurance. I can't pay Nora's tuition. She's punishing us." Daniel, he frowned, glanced at me. "Mom, is that true?" I set my cup down. "Steady. That account is in my name. I'm protecting what's mine." Brianna gasped theatrically. covering her face with her hands. See, she never trusted me. She thinks I'm a thief in my own house. She turned to Daniel, voice trembling but edged like glass. Do something. If she changes the will, we'll lose everything, even this house. Daniel hesitated. I saw his jaw clench, his eyes dart between us. He wasn't cruel enough to side with her outright, but he wasn't brave enough to stand with me either. That's when Brianna's voice dropped lower. Colder. If you don't make her sign the power of attorney again, don't blame me for doing what you won't like. I kept my face calm, but my recorder captured every word, every tone, every veiled threat. Later, when they thought I was upstairs, I sat quietly in the study and played it back. Her voice filled the room, icy and undeniable. If you don't make her sign, this house will be ours. The proof I needed? Old age wisdom says, you don't need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes you fight it with patience because fire burns itself out if you let it. And here's a quirky fact. In the 1700s, ship captains used to keep whisper logs, writing down everything suspicious the crew said, so mutiny could be proven later. Some historians debate whether those logs preserved order or simply bred paranoia. As Brianna's words replayed on the recorder, I realized I was keeping my own whisper log, and one day soon, it would burn her lies to ash. I closed the recorder, slipped it into my drawer, and whispered to myself, "That's one nail in your coffin, Brianna." More to come. Dinner that Sunday looked almost normal. The stew simmered on the stove, apple pie cooled on the counter, and the kitchen light cast a warm yellow glow, soft enough to disguise the tension simmering beneath the surface. I set the table as I always had, careful with each plate and fork, as if routine could keep the ground steady. Daniel sat down first, his eyes tired but searching mine with unease. Brianna followed, her smile brittle, her voice syrupy sweet. "This looks wonderful, Mom, just like old times." I smiled faintly, but my heart beat steady with a different plan. Hidden in my bag was my phone, already cued to play the files I'd been gathering. The whispers, the threats, the truth that had been brushed off as paranoia. I poured water into our glasses. "It is nice to sit together again," I said evenly. "But before we start fresh, there's something I need you both to hear." I set my phone in the middle of the table and pressed play. Brianna's voice spilled out, clear and cold. "You have to make her sign the trust again. Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours." The room froze. Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. Brianna's face drained of color, her smile vanishing in an instant. "I was just joking," she stammered, laughing too quickly. "Come on. Who would actually say something like that seriously?" I stopped the first recording. My finger hovered over the screen, then pressed again. This time, her voice came lower, sharper. "If you won't do it, I'll tell the lawyer she needs guardianship. Once the medical file goes in, she won't be able to fight." No one laughed this time. Daniel stared at the phone like it was a live snake. His lips parted, but no sound came. Brianna shot up from her chair, hands trembling. "Mom, you've twisted this." "These are edited. You set me up." I leaned back, calm as I'd ever been. "Forensic audio will prove otherwise. These files are backed up. Brianna, one copy with my attorney. One off-site. Lie if you like, but the truth already has a voice louder than yours." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her carefully crafted mask had cracked, leaving her face raw and desperate. Daniel's eyes flicked from me to her. "Is it true?" His voice was hoarse, broken. "Tell me you didn't mean it." Brianna's lips trembled, but the silence answered for her. I reached into my bag and pulled out another folder, bank verification papers, marked with red stamps. Forgery identified. I slid them across the table. "This is what you filed. Brianna, fake signatures, false doctors, invalid seals. The bank has already confirmed it." Daniel's hands shook as he opened the folder. His face collapsed as he read the words. "Oh God," he whispered. I spoke softly, but my words cut through the silence. "This is no longer about misunderstandings. It's about intent. You wanted me erased so you could inherit while I'm still alive?" For a moment, the only sound was the clock ticking on the wall. Then Daniel dropped his head into his hands. Brianna stood there, shaking, tears spilling down her cheeks. Not from guilt, but from fear. I looked at them both, my voice steady as a blade. "I don't need to yell. I don't need to beg. The truth is already louder than anything either of you can say. Old age wisdom says, sometimes the table where a family eats becomes the battlefield where loyalty is tested. And here's a quirky fact. In Roman law, a son could be disowned simply by refusing to defend his parent in court. Scholars argue whether it was justice or cruelty. But I wondered what Rome would have made of Daniel tonight. I stood, gathered the recordings, the papers, and my phone, and tucked them neatly back into my bag. My voice was quiet. Final. I won't live in this house another day. Tomorrow, my attorney will have everything. Whatever happens next. Brianna, you brought it on yourself. The next morning, rain streaked the windows in thin silver lines. I sat at my desk with a mug of black coffee, my bag open, papers and recordings neatly stacked like soldiers waiting for orders. It was time to stop reacting and start preparing. I called Pauline. She answered on the second ring, her voice firm and steady as always. I've been expecting your call. I told her everything, the recordings, the forged documents, the bank's verification. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. Marjorie, this is airtight, but we can't just dump it all at once. We'll build the case piece by piece. Her words gave me strength. What do you need me to do? Archive everything. Date it. Time it. Store duplicates. I'll draft affidavits and file for asset protection. By the time we step into court, we'll have a fortress. That afternoon, I set up a system. I labeled folders on my laptop. Audio proof, bank evidence, video recordings, witness notes. Each file was backed up to the encrypted cloud Pauline had arranged. I numbered every document and cross-referenced dates in a notebook, the way Robert and I used to in our little accounting office. Hours slipped by as I worked, the rain tapping steadily against the window. And with each file I saved, my fear lessened. I was no longer just defending myself. I was building a weapon. At dinner that night, Brianna tried to act casual, humming as she set out dishes, her smile stretched thin. Daniel sat silent, pushing food around his plate. They had no idea that every word spoken in this house was now being recorded, stored, and prepared. I let them think I was quiet, fragile, beaten. But inside, I was sharper than ever. Old age wisdom says, the strongest armor isn't anger, it's preparation. And here's a quirky fact. In chess, scholars argue that the queen wasn't always the most powerful piece. In medieval Europe, she moved like a bishop, limited and weak, until centuries later when her power expanded. Some historians debate if it reflected politics or simply strategy. As I closed my files that night, I thought, Brianna still sees me as that limited queen, but she doesn't know I've learned to move across the whole board. When I finally shut off the lamp and lay in bed, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not fear, not anger, readiness. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and rain when I walked in beside Pauline. She carried the case files like armor, her heels clicking with the confidence of someone who had been here 1,000 times. I carried only my purse, but inside, I had everything I needed. The recordings, the bank statements, the forged documents. Brianna was already seated at the defense table. Her hair was immaculate, makeup flawless, a performance of control. But her hands trembled as she shuffled her papers. Daniel sat behind her, not beside, his face pale and drawn. For the first time in months, I felt he might finally be seeing her for what she was. When Judge Fitch entered, silence fell like a curtain. The gavel cracked once, sharp enough to slice through my nerves. Pauline rose first. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Marjorie Hale, has been the target of financial exploitation through forged medical records, falsified signatures, and unauthorized transfers. Today, we present proof that her daughter-in-law, Brianna Hale, attempted to seize control of her estate under the guise of guardianship. The defense attorney stood quickly, voice too loud, too eager. Your Honor, my client acted only out of concern. Mrs. Hale has been forgetful. She merely sought to protect family assets from risk. Judge Fitch's eyes narrowed. We'll see. Pauline approached the evidence table, set down the USB, and pressed play. Brianna's voice filled the courtroom. You have to make her sign the trust again. Once she loses signing authority, this house will be ours. The words rang out like a death knell. Gasps echoed from the gallery. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Pauline's voice was calm. No edits, No cuts. Verified by forensic analysis. Then the second recording. If you won't do it, I'll tell the lawyer she needs guardianship. Once the medical file goes in, she won't be able to fight. Even the judge leaned forward, frowning deeply. Miss Hale, is that your voice? Brianna's lips trembled. I don't remember. The judge's voice was stern. Forensic analysis says otherwise. Care to explain? But Brianna only bowed her head, silent. Old age wisdom says the truth doesn't need to scream. It waits patiently because lies unravel themselves. And here's a quirky fact. In medieval trials, a person's testimony was sometimes tested by making them carry a hot iron. If their wounds healed quickly, they were deemed innocent. Historians still debate whether that was justice or superstition. As I sat there in court, watching Brianna crumble under her own words, I thought, no iron test is needed today. The wound she carries is self-inflicted, and it will not heal quickly. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The courtroom felt heavier after the recordings played, as if every breath carried the weight of what had been exposed. Brianna sat hunched, her flawless hair falling forward to hide her face. Her attorney shuffled his papers nervously, knowing the tide had already turned. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel stood. He walked slowly to the front, not at his wife's side, but toward the judge. His voice trembled at first, but it steadied as he spoke. Your Honor, I am Marjorie Hale's son, and I need to say something. I've been silent for too long. The judge nodded. Go ahead. Daniel's eyes found mine, and for a moment, I saw the boy he once was. The boy who held my hand at Robert's funerals. His voice cracked. I knew things weren't right. I saw the way Brianna controlled her mail, her bank accounts, even her appointments. I told myself she was helping, but deep down, I knew, and I did nothing. My chest tightened. His words cut deep, not because they hurt, but because they were finally true. I let my mother stand alone. Daniel continued, his voice hoarse. I let my wife manipulate me into thinking I was being a good husband by abandoning my duty as a son. That was cowardice. And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. The gallery was silent. Even the judge's stern expression softened slightly. Daniel turned toward Brianna then, his voice shaking. You lied to me. You lied about protecting her. About her memory failing. You told me she was slipping, when the only thing slipping was my own courage. Brianna finally lifted her head, her mascara smudged, eyes wild. Daniel, I did it for us, for Nora. Everything I did was for our family, but Daniel only shook his head. No. Family doesn't build its future on destroying the people who gave it a past. My throat tightened. I didn't cry. Tears had been spent months ago, but something inside me eased. Just a little. For once, Daniel wasn't hiding behind silence. Old age wisdom says, admitting the truth doesn't erase the damage, but it stops the bleeding. And here's a quirky fact. In ancient Greek tragedies, when a character confessed their flaw on stage, the chorus often cried out not to punish, but to mourn the weakness that led them astray. Scholars argue if those plays were cautionary tales or just mirrors of human frailty. As Daniel stepped back, his eyes glistening, I thought, maybe this is both a tragedy and a warning. The judge's gavel struck the block. This court recognizes Daniel Hale's statement. But accountability does not absolve criminal intent. She looked directly at Brianna. The evidence against you is overwhelming. We will proceed accordingly. And in that moment, I knew the scales had finally tipped. When the trial ended, I walked out into the cool autumn air. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, and reporters hovered with their cameras. But I didn't stop. Pauline walked beside me, her file clutched under one arm. Her voice steady. It's over, Marjorie. You've won. One. The word felt strange, almost too sharp for my mouth. I didn't feel like a victor, just someone who had survived. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small lakeside house about 10 minutes from town. It wasn't grand 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a view of the water that caught the morning sun like liquid gold. But it was mine. Mine alone. No one else's name on the deed. I planted lavender and daisies by the porch, just as Robert and I once dreamed we would if we ever retired by the water. And slowly, peace began to slip back into my days. Sophie visited every weekend. She'd tumble out of Daniel's car, racing up the steps with her backpack bouncing. Grandma, my hero, she'd shout. wrapping me in a hug that smelled faintly of apple shampoo. We baked pies together, walked the lakeshore, and she'd sit with me on the porch, her little legs swinging as I told her stories about Robert and the old office we built with nothing but grit and coffee. One afternoon, she asked quietly, "Grandma, why aren't you mad at Dad anymore?" He looked so sad. I smoothed her hair and smiled softly. "Anger wears you out. Sweetheart, your father isn't bad. He was weak. And sometimes, the best way to teach someone is to show them you can stand without them." Her eyes shone with understanding beyond her years. Old age wisdom says, sometimes the greatest freedom isn't winning a fight. It's knowing you don't need to fight anymore. And here's a quirky fact. Honey never spoils. Archaeologists once found jars of honey in Egyptian tombs, still edible after thousands of years. Scholars debate whether it was food or medicine, but I think it was a message. Some things endure. Looking out over the lake that evening, Sophie's head on my shoulder, I thought, I, too, have endured. A year later, I found myself standing on a small stage in Belmont's town hall. The late afternoon sun poured through tall windows, catching the gold letters on a brand new plaque. Hail, Foundation for Elder Justice. I looked out over the rows of faces, mostly women my age, silver-haired, lined with years of endurance. Some nodded at me. Some wiped tears silently. Each one carried a story of being dismissed, ignored, or stripped of dignity by the very people they trusted. I held the microphone gently, my voice steady. People think age makes us weak, but age doesn't erase us. It sharpens us. We've lived long enough to know when to keep quiet and when to finally speak. No one gets to decide our worth but us. Applause rose. Soft but strong. Beside me stood Sophie, 12 years old, her small hand clutching mine. She looked up with wide eyes and whispered, "Grandma, you're my hero." I smiled and squeezed her hand. "No. Sweetheart, real heroes don't let others write their story, and you'll write your own." One day, when the hall emptied, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the river glimmered under a fading orange sky. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. Sometimes I think of Brianna not with anger, but with clarity. Greed always costs more than it gains. As for Daniel, he comes by often now, quieter, humbler, trying to stitch together the torn fabric of trust. And Sophie, she is my legacy, stronger than either of them knows. Old age wisdom says, survival is its own form of victory. And here's a quirky fact. Oak trees don't bear acorns until they're at least 50 years old. Scholars argue whether it's patience or nature's design. But either way, I like to think strength ripens late. And here I am, 70 years old, finally bearing fruit of my own. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting or slammed doors sometimes. It comes quietly, wearing a smile. For me, it came through my daughter-in-law, Brianna. She started small, paying bills, sorting my mail, rescheduling my appointments. Each favor chipped away at my independence until she stood in a bank one morning, declaring I was no longer competent, trying to seize everything Robert and I had built. But that day, I stepped out of the shadows. I exposed her forgery in front of the manager, and from that moment, I stopped being her victim. I found proof in bank slips and missing folders, then opened Robert's hidden safes, where decades of careful records waited like weapons. With Pauline, our trusted attorney, I built a fortress of evidence recordings of Brianna's threats, confirmation of her lies. At dinner, I played those recordings. In court, we revealed her schemes. And when the judge struck the gavel, Brianna's mask crumbled at last. Daniel, my son, confessed his silence had been cowardice. His apology didn't erase the wounds, but it softened the bleeding. And in time, I moved forward into a small lakeside house, into peace, into freedom. Now I run the Hale Foundation for Elder Justice, speaking for women who were told they had no voice. And beside me stands Sophie, my granddaughter, who calls me her hero. This is my story. Betrayal, humiliation, and finally, redemption. A reminder that dignity can't be stolen. And no one, not a scheming daughter-in-law, not even silence, can erase a woman who chooses to speak.